Whenever we ready. Do we have an agenda? All right,
And
so
it's the exact same thing this year.
members, we ready?
Yes.
We ready, Ms. Evans? Good evening. Today's August 8th, 2024. The time now is 6:15 p.m. We're going to call the City Council Budget Workshop to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Ronnie Felder, Chairperson Douglas Lawson, Chair Pro Tem Chadwick McCoy,
Here.
Councilperson Kashamba Miller Anderson,
Present.
Councilperson Shirley Lanier,
Here.
Councilperson Glenn Spiritus,
Here.
City Manager Jonathan Evans,
Present.
Acting City Clerk Deborah McCullen is present, City Attorney Don Nguyen.
Here.
Mr. Chair Pro Tem, you have a quorum, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to jump right into invocation and pledge of allegiance, led by Officer Cajuste.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Introduction and purpose, Mr. Jonathan Evans, City Manager of City Riviera Beach.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff. Thank you for allowing for us to be here this evening to have our budget workshop for the FY 2025 budget. This evening, we're going to go over some substantive areas concerning the fiscal year 2025 budget that gives a great overview of some of the operations of the city as well as some of the finances, and then get into some of the nuances of some of the expenditures associated with the proposed budget. The general fund budget, which is your general fund, is your largest fund, is $111 million, which facilitates about an 11.82% increase from your proposed FY 2024 budget, which was $99 million. The budget that is before you this evening for consideration is balanced at the millage rate of 8.28 mils, which is a reduction in the millage rate of 8.35 mils. The purpose of the reduction that staff brought forward in this budget document was that we anticipate in the future moving forward with some of the increases associated with the bonds that were successfully passed by our community. And so we wanted to provide some relief as a part of the budget process. Now, I can tell you as we get into the budget discussions, one of the things that we will show you is when we do in fact reduce the budget and we have economic high years or up years, you do lose revenue. And so we'll show you that in the past, if we would have kept and maintained the millage rate, how much more monies would have been available for general government operations. One of the largest increases that you saw in your budget was associated with new construction. That was $287 million that was added on to the tax roll in new construction, and primarily that is as a result of the MRIT. So we are excited that that particular project has moved forward, and then we can anticipate a certificate of occupancy for the second tower, which will then also allow for another influx of additional ad valorem value in our community. So as we go through the budget process, you'll see that staff had the opportunity to place forward some budget recommendations. And so at this particular session, we're not going to get into the staff presentations. The staff presentations will be for subsequent budget discussions. But for tonight's purposes, let me get into the slideshow. So we'll give you a general overview of the taxable value and the finances. We'll go into some important dates and then discussion on the fiscal year 2025 budget. So this is the first slide, and when we talked about the millage rate, you can see over the past, since 2015 to 2025, over a 10-year period, the taxable value in the community has grown exponentially. So you went from $3 billion in assessed taxable value to where we are at now, which is close to $9 billion in taxable value. So significant economic growth in the city of Riviera Beach. If you see our millage rate back in 2015 was 8.9520 mills. And then you can see the millage rate that is in the adopted budget is 8.2, or the proposed budget is 8.2850 mills. If you look at that delta between fiscal year 2022, that 8.452 mills to that 8.2850 mills, and if we were to keep the millage rate from 2022 and carry that forward, roughly you would have had about $1.4 million of additional revenue to be able to appropriate for additional activities and programs and the like. And so you can see that the economic growth is apparent in our community. And so one of the things that we need to have the conversation with the board is you already adopted your maximum millage rate, which is that 8.3500 mills, which is what your previous year's budget was provided for. We did provide the relief as communicated early from the perspective that you do have about $115 million of available bonding capacity as a result of the municipal bonds that the city successfully passed. And so knowing that the millage rate will go up when some of those projects come online, we did want to provide some flexibility if that in fact was the desire of the board. So moving into the Riviera Beach tax bill and millage rate, one of the things that I think is very important, and we talk about it a lot, is what the overall tax bill and tax burden is. And I think most of our residents will come and communicate, what their tax bill is. Well, if you take this particular situation here and you look at a gross property value of $250,000, and let's say it's a homesteaded property here in Riviera Beach, the net taxable value is $200,000. But then when you apply the appropriate millage rates across the county, you see Riviera Beach at 8.35, you have Palm Beach County at 6.4, the school district, you have the county at 4.5, and then you have the other agencies that can levy a tax for a total millage rate of 20.73. Well, that total tax bill is $4,200 for that home. But out of that entire tax bill, roughly the city of Riviera Beach receives $1,600 as a result of our millage rate. And so a lot of individuals believe that when they are, in essence, paying the tax bill, that all of that goes to the government entity which they reside, and that's not in fact the case. The city of Riviera Beach only receives a portion of that to provide a variety of municipal services. As a result of the anticipated budget, we anticipate to collect roughly about $67 million in general fund revenue. And if you look at your public safety departments, largely both police and fire consume a large majority of that to a tune of almost over $50 million. And so availability of funds is something that we're going to talk about, is when you look at the overall budget, when I talked about the general fund budget being $111 million, in totality, there's a lot of other fees for services and other fees that help, in essence, pay for the provision of municipal government services. One of the things that's important to note is that we are very strong as it relates to our diversification of funds. In a county government, you rely a lot more on your ad valorem revenue than you do in a municipal government where we have more accessibilities to funds. So when we talk about fees and fees for services and increased fees for services, that assists in us being able to defray some of the costs for government. And so as we get into some of the more robust conversations with the departments to talk about fees as it relates to rentals and permits and the like, those particular modifications, as de minimis as those increases are, certainly it is helpful for us in the budget process. So at this time, I'm going to have Mr. Sherman share with you something that this board took the stance on and led as it relates to providing for an exemption for our seniors that will be available to them this particular year. And that was something that was important for this board, and we were successful in moving forward with adopting that. So Mr. Sherman will get into the specificities on this, and then we'll continue on through the presentation. Mr. Sherman?
Thank you, Mr. Evans, and good evening, board. If you recall, in January, the board actually passed the required ordinance that allowed for an additional exemption for our seniors, property owners within the city. 2025, so the bills that are going out this fall for fiscal year 2025 will be the first year that they will actually be able to have applied. I'm sure that period is probably already passed, but have applied and, and received this credit on their property tax bill. Just to go over a few of the facts, again, you had to be 65 years or older. You could get up to a $50,000 credit off the taxable value. Obviously, if your property doesn't have $50,000 of taxable value to take the credit, it would be a lesser amount. The property has to be less than $250,000 in assessed value. And for 2023, I don't have the 2024 number yet. For 2023, the income limit was $35,167. Again, we don't have an updated number from the property appraiser, but when we talked to them last year in January, when we were actually passing this ordinance, they had given us numbers that were 228 eligible property owners, and the total cost to the city would be about $95,000. So this adjustment has been made in our property tax revenues, the estimates that we're currently using. Just continue to.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So this particular slide, I know one of the conversations that we've had concerning the budget is fund balance and what's the most appropriate fund balance ratio. And so if you take a look at the slide that's before you, it speaks to the city of Riviera Beach fund balance, and our fund balance is at 36%. And one of the things I think is important, if you can take a look at the notation on the bottom half of the screen that speaks to Fort Myers, and when they anticipated or when they experienced the hurricane in 2022, their fund balance was at 25%, and in 2023 it was listed at 18.6%. That your fund balance in essence is your rainy day fund, but incorporated in that fund balance is not just cash on hand. There's a lot of other elements that are contained in your fund balance, and I do want to allow for Mr. Sherman to speak in greater specificities on that.
Yeah, so as far as the fund balance, again, this is right off of our balance sheet. We take these numbers. But again, if you recall, when we met on July 20th on Saturday over at the Emirate, we talked about the fact of how Moody's and S&P look at the governments. So they make adjustments to these numbers. But this is our clear number. Again, we took the same numbers off of everybody's balance sheet. So you see our friends to the north, Palm Beach Gardens, North Palm, and Jupiter all have far higher numbers than we do. I can't really explain why the ones to that left-hand side are as low as they are, other than, Fort Myers with the impact of the storm. But these numbers, again, are off a balance sheet. So there's items that are not reflected, that we're not required to record on our balance sheet. For example, pensions and our pension liabilities. So I will have another slide a little bit later to talk about that.
One of the things, Mr. Chairman, if you can go back to that other slide, I think it's important, is GFOA is the Government Finance Association of America. They will tell you that your fund balance for a government agency should be, at least, 20%. If you're a coastal community, or if you're a community that has some economic challenges, they always encourage you to carry a higher fund balance. So if you surveyed most of the municipalities on the coastline, you'll see some of them carry a larger fund balance, because in the event that things happen, they have to utilize that fund for the purposes of providing for government services and the acquisition of items and materials and the like. If there is a storm, you will also see in our budget, and we're unique here, is that we have a major disaster fund. And I think we've had pretty robust conversations at the board level concerning the major disaster fund. And so you do have a situation where you have almost something that's functioning as a rainy day fund, but has specific and explicit purposes concerning its usage. So we can go to the next slide. Mr. Chairman can talk about cash on hand.
Yeah, one of the other factors that we're always looking at is our liquidity and our abilities to obviously pay our bills on time. This is a slide, I typically like to present. This is cash on hand, how many days cash we have at the end of the fiscal year. So again, that red bar there, that's Revere Beach. Again, we fall, in the middle of the other communities. It literally costs the city $273,000 a day to operate. That's where we are right now. And that, again, covers everything: salaries, benefits, vehicles, fuel, debt service. We're at $273,000 a day. So 142, this graph actually makes us, look like we're, smack in the middle. However, again, I would ask that you look at the note on the bottom. By the end of October, and this happens and occurs, every year, by the end of October, we only have 54 days worth of cash on hand. We pay our debt service, we pay our pensions, and obviously, we continue to, operate, on a daily basis. So we are going into the tax season with less than 2 months of cash on hand. So again, when we start getting our tax payments is when we can breathe a little bit of sigh of relief. But every year we go through this process of how much is the payroll, how much is the accounts payable run this week, how much money do we have in the bank, what do we have to move from our investments. It's a constant week by week basis until obviously we get the tax revenues in. But again, once those tax monies start to dwindle down in May, June, again, it's a week by week monitoring to get us to the end of September. Again, after that July 20th meeting that we had, I did provide to the elected officials a copy of this page from the Moody's presentation at the GFOA conference. And as I mentioned on that day, the rating agencies are really opening up their playbook and really telling the governments what's important to them and what they should be considering. So this particular page, and I will point out that this is dealing with fund balance and liquidity, which are the last two slides. And this is only 30% impact on your rating. Again, they're going to look at income levels. They're going to look at management. They're going to look at unemployment and those types of issues. But on the top line there, Moody's is saying that if you want to be a AAA rated community, you need to have fund balance in excess of 35%. A AA community is 25 to 35%. So again, we're at 36.9, so we're really, at the top end of the AA, bottom tier of the AAA in this one criteria. When you look at the liquidity ratio, again, it says, well, you want to be AAA, your liquidity needs to be over 40%. AA between 30 and 40%. And again, if you look over to the right, our liquidity ratio is actually 32.7. So we're at the bottom end of the AA category.
Chair,
Go ahead.
thank you, and I apologize. Are you on the record?
Madam Clerk, record reflect that I've shown the dais.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you,
Councilman, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. So I guess my concern is the overarching reason of the importance of our bond ratings is the interest rate and our credibility when it goes to the bond market, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, and then I think maybe a slide or two previously, you mentioned that when we get around tax time, we do less than 2 months of available cash on hand, about
At the
2
end of
months.
October, yeah.
Okay, so the very first thing, and I think I've been meaning to ask this, is what is the exact amount per month of monies that we take off top? What is the gross amount that we actually take from utility services district, USD, utility special district, for the user service fees for the administrative piece?
Okay.
And how often do we do that?
How do we do that? Okay.
How often?
Well, we do it once a year. We do all our transfers at the beginning of the year.
4 days?
So all the funds we transfer to the insurance fund, the funds we transfer to the IT fund, transferring into debt service, and we do that all at the beginning of the year and move those funds.
So what if you have a massive amount of uncollectible accounts? So you transfer at the beginning of the year for all of the anticipated services that we're going to provide?
We do, and that's just been the way we've done it. But if that should happen,
That shouldn't happen. You know why? Because if you're taking the money at the beginning of the fiscal year, if for whatever reason the utility district doesn't perform, you're going to always true up whatever allocations you can to match the monies that you taken. It would seem it should be on a reimbursement basis.
yeah, we've actually considered building it into the rate structure. So when every time we bill it, it actually does the calculations similar to the way that the tax works.
Mr. Sherman, Ms. Nguyen, this whole scenario you just said
Yeah.
is highly against the charter. The city cannot control the books of the utility special district. And the very fact that you say you take the money off top at the beginning of the fiscal year is specifically excluded, that the city should have no part in controlling the district books other than the ability to do any other public information request that's available to the public. So I would much rather see that the services are performed and then an invoice gets sent and then it gets billed that way. But if you're taking money off of the top, you're controlling the utility district's books.
Well, I would remind you that I'm the finance director for the utility district, so
And-
I do wear multiple hats.
But this is the commingling issue that I have.
No,
Because
it's
that's not what the charter-
commingling.
Okay, well, you go ahead and
Pay
do-
our bills. Everyone pays their bills. We do the transfers at the beginning of the year.
Right, but I can tell you, this is the fox watching the hen house. The charter specifically says the city or its personnel. So perhaps we need to get us another finance director for the utility district.
You could.
Because what you're doing.
You could, except that's not what the charter says. So you would have to go through the process of changing the charter.
the
You
cha-
can't get another attorney. You can't get another clerk. You can't get another finance director.
Actually,
It
the
certainly
user
does.
special district says we have to have one, but it doesn't say it has to be the same as the cities. Am I right?
I don't believe you are.
Oh,
However, we'll deal with the budget.
no, but
So, I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, may I proceed?
Go ahead, sir.
So back
It's
in
not
June-
important that I have questions about, like, how are we able to carry the amount of fund balance to be able to have the amount of cash on hand when we're taking cash out of the utility district at the beginning of the year, which seemingly seems to be balancing it. No other place, no other services that somebody can provide, the security companies don't ask us to pay them up front at the beginning of the year. So I'm just simply trying to figure out, how do we have this cash on hand that carries us through this? And if so, it seems like the utility special district will always be the agency, because there's no way. Where's the reconciliation at? If we take $10 million at the beginning of the fiscal year, how is that reconciled?
And to that point, Councilman, completely agree. So as Mr. Sherman said, we're going to address the budget. And if you would like that question answered, we can have that answered. But the concern of proceeding with the budget discussion was not based upon the management and staff and oversight of where we need to change the charter. So this discussion, I agree, he can answer that question. And if Mr. Sherman can address that.
So to provide outside verification that the city's finances and how we operate are acceptable and well respected in the financial industry, on June 17th, Fitch upgraded the city's public revenue bonds. The city is rated AA, and our revenue bonds are rated A-. Less than a month ago, Fitch also confirmed that the utility special district revenues, revenue bonds, are rated A+. Okay. Both very solid, both in line with how other communities would be rated, where the city would be rated higher and the revenue bonds would be rated a notch lower.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but this goes right to the purpose of the amount of cash that we have on hand. And I have the charter up here for the utility special district. Article 3 is entitled Board of Directors. Section 3.01 describes this. Subsection D says the city shall have no authority to require the district to use the district's funds or assets for any particular purpose, to cause the dissolution of the district, or to review the district books other than the general rights granted to the city under state law. So it seems to me, the question that I'm asking is, how can Mr. Sherman suggest to us that the services that the city charges the district, they take at the beginning of the year, not even knowing what those services are actually going to pan out to be, and there's not even been a discussion about how that is reconciled. So to the very purpose, it seems to me that the district is basically balancing the books and debt service of the city, because by our very own charter, no authority over the district books. But if we have the same person managing both, you clearly got a conflict with the very spirit of what this charter's intent is. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I know most people won't see it that way, but clearly.
So
Mr. Sherman, so
Mr.
to
Chair,
that point,
sure.
so just to follow up to that point, the concern raised by Councilman McCoy is that the bills are paid at the beginning of the fiscal year and they're not reconciled at the end. Go
May
ahead.
I? Sure. Would you like me to wait for Councilman McCoy to come back?
No, please, go ahead. It's on the
Okay.
record.
So, not true. So this is what we do. The cost allocation plan that we charge, where we come up with these costs, is actually a year behind. The amount that the utility district pays us in 2025 will be for the expenses that we incurred in 2024.
Okay.
So they're actually paying it in arrears.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
That's sufficient for me, so you can proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? You can proceed. Thank you.
Okay. So again, we keep focusing on the rating agencies and focusing on fund balance and liquidity. And this is really the reason why. If you look at this scale, which I just pulled off today, You can see the AAA rates at the top, and then the AA rates are in the middle, and then the A-rated rates are in the third tier. You can see the AAA and the AA, they're actually fairly compressed. There's only 10 basis points between the 10-year rates. But once you drop down to that A rate, now there's 25 basis point spread. And again, when you're looking to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars, every basis point counts. But we just wanted to let you know that this is where the rates are today. And this is before the Fed has taken any action to reduce the rates. This is a sheet that we actually prepare every year. It does our tax revenue calculations. And if I can kind of walk you through this, the top line, starting on the left-hand side, our values came in this year at $8.8 billion. Second column over shows what our new properties, new construction. This year we had $287 million. And as I'm sure you're all aware, most of that was the AMRIT. We had originally run this at 8.1. That's why the 8.1 is showing on here. And as the manager said, that generated $67.7 million. Now, we don't get to keep all of that. The first thing we have to do is figure out how much of that actually belongs to the CRA. So the CRA calculation is on the bottom of the spreadsheet. CRA has a current taxable value of $1.2 billion. Then what we do is we have to subtract out the base year. So when you hear the term tax increment, this is the tax increment. That $132 million of value was what the value was that resided in the boundaries of the CRA when the CRA was created. So that money, that $132 million, continues to be credited to the city. So we have to subtract that out, multiply it by the millage rate, and that gives us $8.8 million for the CRA. Out of that amount for the CRA, we actually get to retain 5% of that TIF in the city side. So that's why you see the 95%. So $8.4 million is what we would owe the CRA if the millage rate was 8.1. So going back up to that top line, you go to the 67.7. You can see that the city retains $59.3 million and the CRA gets 8.4. But we're not done. Now drop down the page below that top line and you'll see 1.5% is according to the charter. That's the money that we're required to deposit into the major disaster fund. And this year is just over $1 million.
Mr. Chair?
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
I know that was a charter provision, but I don't recall, was there any specific, I guess, more fine-tuned language as to what exactly is that encompassed?
What we can use it for? Yes.
Did the charter spell it out?
The charter
specific-
spells it out. It does.
Okay.
And it really, again, deals with preparation and, response to to disasters.
Well, perhaps the board should get some of that because we respond to stuff that's pretty much disastrous. At least I do.
So when we first did the budget, the notes off to the side, when we first did the budget and we ran all the numbers, we actually had a balanced budget at 8.1 mils. Then the departments came in, they made their appeal, they made their cases, and now we're at the 8.25% by adding in the additional positions that the departments have requested. And just again, for information, every 0.1 is about $720,000. So whether you're going up or down, that 0.1 is about $720,000. So going from 8.1 to 2.8 was about $1.9 million that we added back into the budget.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
One of the one of the things I think is very important to for the board to be aware of is obviously that as we see economic redevelopment occur specifically on the Broadway corridor and within the CRA district, you can see the way the system is structured is that the increase associated with a project like Oculina that is coming forward from the Forest Development Group or what have you, that particular development, if it's projected to be $500 million, that revenue that is collected associated with that project largely goes into the CRA. The city sees a little bit of the benefit associated with that 5%, but largely that goes into the CRA. And so it is critically important as we see, I think, over $1 billion+ worth of redevelopment opportunities within the CRA, that both the CRA and the city work together collaboratively to make investments in infrastructure, because as we see more persons living, shopping, dining within the district, the city doesn't stand to gain that upside as it relates to the ad valorem revenue as the CRA does. And so there is plenty of opportunities for joint ventures and joint opportunities for the investment of infrastructure in that particular district. Because you can see, roughly it's that $8.4 million that if you did not have a CRA, that would be added to what your property tax value is of revenue that you would invariably collect. And so you see the number in 1983, the revenue for the city is frozen at that 1983 level. And then we get a 5% increase as a result of what the final number is when it is calculated in the CRA. So if you had hundreds of millions of dollars that happened in the CRA, the city doesn't benefit as it relates to monies in the general fund. And so I do want to make sure that that's something that the board is aware of, that as economic growth occurs in that particular part of our community, there is a lot of value in joint ventures or joint investments from both the city and CRA, because that's where you are largely going to see your economic growth in the city.
Thanks, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
So when we start the budget process, and we usually do start the budget process in October, right after we have adopted the current year's budgets, first thing we do is we focus on the revenues. We need to know how much we have available to spend in the next fiscal year. So we begin analyzing all of our revenues. And this slide here kind of lays out the thought process that we go through as we're going through each individual revenue source. So obviously our property taxable values, those come from the county property appraiser. Our millage rate is what the board approves. So we start with the maximum millage, and then we then try to work that number down to the extent that we can. Our franchise fees, we actually have city manager and myself, usually every 2 or 3 years, we have a call with FPL, and FPL gives us their projections on the revenues that they believe that they will be paying into the city.
Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chairman, if we can just sit on FPL for a second. FPL is the largest taxpayer in the city of Riviera Beach. But one of the things that is challenging as it relates to their particular investment in our community is that it is assessed as machinery and equipment. So it in fact depreciates. And so that's one of the challenges when we talk about utilizing monies for the purposes of funding our capital budget. We utilize a portion of those proceeds to do that. And that is one thing that obviously we want FPL to make additional investments and the like, but it is not assessed as it would be for regular property. It is valued as machinery. And so as it gets older, there are millions of dollars that the city will invariably lose as a result of the aging of that infrastructure. And Mr. Chairman, any other specificities that you wanted to add, but I think it was also last year, $147 million worth of FPL infrastructure was taken off the tax roll because they hired a firm to basically look at their infrastructure, assess the value of their infrastructure. They went to the Board of Appeals and appealed it. And specifically in our community, I believe we lost $147 million worth of taxable value last year.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, they went to the Value Adjustment Board and argued their case and got that number taken down. And again, FPL.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
So question, I've only seen and heard of those, and I don't see often that people do it. I do know that it's available for a person to go to the Value Adjustment Board mainly for property taxes, but I guess it would make the same difference for tangible. But are we not allowed to enjoin if we have a different perspective about what the real valuation is of their property? Because who's there to challenge FPL as to the valuation of their property?
So I actually have been to the Value Adjustment Board once when I was in West Palm Beach. So the property appraiser has, again, their staff that is doing the assessments, and they're going to look at the utilities across the full county. So whether it's in, Riviera Beach or it's in Okeechobee, wherever, right? They're going to be looking at all the utilities. They actually come in to a hearing board. It's an actual board you go for, and they both, in essence, then make their case. So again, the property appraiser staff is making their case on, and defending their number. And then again, obviously the petitioner would, make their case.
Okay.
So again, the state revenues, so we're talking revenue sharing, sales tax, fuel tax, those are all provided to us by the state. They actually, go through their calculations and provide that to every community. Our building permits, we do look at trends, we do look at what's on the board, but we do not put in a revenue that exceeds the amount that is budgeted on the expense side for what those revenues can be used for. So again, we look at the development services budget, once we get there, and then we look at the specific items that are eligible to be paid out of the building permits, and we don't carry any more than that, no matter what projects may or may not be happening. Because again, if there's a big windfall in building permits, it doesn't go to our unrestricted fund balance. It's reserved for future development services costs. And then, we do have a lot of revenues that you see up there. We're just looking at the historical numbers, economic trends. Good one this year is investment earnings. We're knocking out of the park this year in our investments. We know those numbers are probably going to go down next year, and the Fed makes some rate adjustments. But that's actually, a decent number for this year. So again, we're not necessarily looking at, well, what did we do last year? We are looking at what may impact those items as we move forward. The payment in lieu of taxes is 6%. That's charged to USD, Stormwater, and the Marina.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman, go ahead.
I couldn't wait till we got to this one. What's the agreement and how do we arrive at 6%?
So we used our rate consultant to come up with that number, the 6% number. And it was adopted by the board, I'm going to say 2013, 2012, 2013, something like that.
So utility special district pays 6% of their revenues plus whatever the amount that you say that the city takes off the top at the beginning of the year.
Right. So the next line is the admin fees. Okay. And that comes out from the cost allocation plan. So again, we put in all the factors. How many employees do you have? How many vehicles do you have? How many computers do you have? How many agenda items do you have? How many, and Ms. Reynolds goes through that entire calculation. And that covers the city direct costs that we have associated with, with the utility district, stormwater, solid waste, that covers all of those costs. The pilot payments are what covers the costs that aren't in the administrative service fee costs. So it covers for the use of the roads, it covers for, the streets and easements and police and fire and all those types of items that aren't in the administrative service fees.
Follow up.
But
So if we were, I guess we're simply saying that for the purposes because they're enterprise funds?
They are enterprise funds, correct?
Okay, so even if the USD came back in-house or the water utility department is still gonna be an enterprise fund, and the 6% will still be there, but I
They'll
don't,
still be there.
I mean, so,
Yeah, they actually, they charged the pilot since 2004, prior to my arrival, but it had never been actually adopted. So I brought it to the board and had them actually adopt that fee.
but
Now,
what are other communities doing? I mean,
everybody, it's done. It's done.
and I guess
At least
my,
statewide, but it's done. Everybody charges to those fees.
and I get it, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but what is the rational basis? I mean, I know exactly why there's a 6% state sales tax, and then you got the 1% local sales tax, but what's the rational nexus to come up with 6%?
It's supposed to approximate a property tax rate is really what it's supposed to come up with. So they looked at the value of the plant at that time. And if it was a privately owned plant, what would you be paying for property taxes? And that's again, how they came up with that number.
That's very arbitrary because if you sit here and talk about FPL went to the VAB to say that their value is not really that, I can tell you that place over at 800 West Blue certainly ain't what it is 10 years ago as far as the
Yeah,
value is
yes.
concerned. I'm not going to argue with you on the pilot,
Yeah.
but I just want to understand, do we just pick these numbers out of the sky as to why we charge 6%?
Mm.
If there's some sort of obviously state statute sets forth the surcharge amount that we can charge for users outside the city for where we provide water service. I just want to know where 6% comes from, and is
Yeah.
this common among what other municipalities charge
No,
their enterprise funds?
Yeah, that's the rationale. And again, I think that's where most communities are. I have seen some that are 8 or 10%. And I think if you actually look at the electric utilities, they're higher. They're even higher than that.
So what's to prevent us from charging 6% for the CRA?
CRA doesn't, what does CRA have that's taxable?
Building that we're in?
Except it's not taxable.
Right, and neither is the
Yeah.
utility district's plant because it's,
But you
I
could,
mean-
you could probably make that case.
I
mean,
don't
we
want to
tried-
make
we
the
tried to
case,
do
but
it-
I'm just trying to figure out,
Yeah.
what is there a universal rhyme and reason as to why we do this? If there's something that's established as precedent in some sort of case that says that this is a justifiable expense and the amount is reasonable and commensurate with what we should be charging. Because when you talk about pilots, right? I know people don't like when I talk about churches. Boy, we sure got a lot of them.
We have a lot of them.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm just like,
Which was, and I know you don't like this either, but that's where the fire assessment fee kind of equaled out because remember, the nonprofits were paying a portion. But I would point out, and I don't disagree with you about
wait,
this facility.
But Randy, Mr. Sherman,
Yeah,
you know what? Why don't we charge the schools this? The school has all of this property that's not on the tax rolls that has not been developed. In fact, they literally took monies out of the city coffers when they purchased all of that property along Avenue J, and we're not getting one dime from it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and we actually we're not allowed to charge them the stormwater either, which, again, court case, but yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you, and that's something that if you would like, we can certainly look into it. Because again, the pilot is supposed to bounce off and not give government a benefit over, a for-profit. But you're right, this facility is probably a good example of something if you wanted us to look at it.
we've got railroad tracks in the city. Do they pay us taxes?
There's a small amount that comes through from the railroad, right? But it's a fairly small amount.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so on the revenue side, again, these are our major categories of revenues. And you can see we have the 24 numbers, excuse me, which were budgeted at the 99.6 million, and the 25 numbers that were budgeted at the 111 million. You will notice that the property taxes are at 69.7 million. That does include the CRAs, and it does include what goes to the major disaster. Both of those come out on the other side of the ledger as transfers. So our tax revenues, net again of all of the exemptions, are up 12.82%. This is with a millage rate of 8.285. But again, you can see that there are some increases. Again, the investment income sticks out right there in the middle at 193%. Whereas we far exceeded that $275,000 this year. There's really nothing on here that is significant. We don't have any additional rate increases in here other than what you've already had. So BTR has already been approved. So those aren't in here. And again, the development service revenues or the building permit revenues are equal to their budget.
Mr. Sherman,
Yes.
the investment earnings, why did that substantially increase?
I'm sorry, which line?
Investment earnings?
Interest rates. So we kind of anticipated that those rates are going to start coming down last year. So we budgeted the 275 and we have far exceeded that this year. So again, based on what we have now, where the rates are today, even anticipating that the interest rates will be going back down, we think we can hit that $800,000.
If we had parking revenue, would it show up on this revenue source
You
spreadsheet?
said parking?
Parking revenue.
No, this is just the general fund. So this
Just
does
general
not
fund.
include parking or anything, or USD. We'll deal with those on the next meeting.
Thank you.
On the expense side, again, it's really the same process that we do on the revenue side. We do spend a lot of time trying to calculate those numbers and get them as precise as we can. Obviously, wages and benefits are our largest items. We go through the contracts. We're checking for vacancies, attrition rates, whether we're going to do any reorganizations. We look at, retirements, who's in drop. We look to see if we're eliminating any programs, adding any programs, or if we're adding any new facilities. So again, as we go through, our construction projects, there would be more personnel that would be coming on board to support those facilities, even if it's just simply in facility maintenance. The health, dental, life, typically we do a solicitation. Last year we got a 2-year rate, and then HR under Ms. Bartley was able to come in and actually negotiate it lower than they had initially proposed for the second year. So there's a lot of negotiations that usually go on there. But our claims history obviously plays a role, and the medical CPI, which far exceeds what you're used to seeing for a CPI. But all of that is built in. Our retirement contributions, we get the FRS rates from the Department of Revenue, and then our rates are determined through actuarial studies. And again, they're included in our budgets. On the operating side, again, a lot of it is what's the history, what's happening, what do you need for capital this year? Do you need a new copier? Do you need new ladders? And all of those discussions typically take place. Our general liability insurance, we go through the same process that we go through with health insurance. We're looking at claims, we're looking at coverage, we're looking for our history of claims, the tail that we have on old claims that are still open, what our retention levels are, what is insurance going to cost. Do our insurance coverages need to change from prior years? And again, then that goes to our broker, who then goes out and solicits bids on behalf of the city. The internal service funds, this is coming really from the cost allocation plan. Again, we look at what their budgets are, what their needs are, and then those go into the cost allocation plan and get allocated out to the individual departments. And again, on the rest of the operating costs, again, we're looking at trends, we're looking at pricing. We have the numbers from FPL. When we have those conversations with FPL, they do tell us what types of rate hikes that they are going to be asking for up in Tallahassee. I mentioned earlier about the pension plans. So again, when we talked about fund balance, one of the things that we do not or are not required to put on our balance sheet are the liabilities that are unfunded in our pension plans. So what we have here is our required contributions. The first three columns address the percentage of our contributions. So on the city contribution plans, you see the general employee contribution rate for 2025 has actually dropped from 21.81 to 21.73. But then when you get down to police and fire, both of those contribution rates have increased. Fire most significantly going from 34% of salaries to 40%. The column on the right, the far two columns on the right where it says funded ratio, what this is again, when we get the actuarial reports, it is telling us, here is your liability and here's your assets. So if my assets exceed what my liability is, I'm going to have a number over 100%. If my assets are less than my liabilities, I'm going to have a number under 100%. So when we refinanced these back in 2015, those numbers were all in the 60-70% range. In 2015, the pension plans were charging us 7.5% interest on the amount of the liabilities that we had on the books. So we refinanced the debt at a rate closer to 3.5%, saving us in essence 4% interest rate on all of those liabilities. So if you look at the police department for 2023, which would be in the report dated last September, was at 93.1%. And that represents about a $7 million liability. And if you look at the firefighters, which is at 99.9%, that's only a $75,000 liability. So you see fire in 2022 was actually over 100, and they slid under 100 at the end of 23. The pension plan for the general employee is actually funded at 121% of the liability.
Go ahead, Mr. Councilman Spiritus.
Randy, what do you do with the accrued vacation and sick time?
So when someone leaves, they get paid out their accrued sick and vacation time. When the statutes changed in 2011, I believe it was, they capped the sick and vacation accruals, and you could no longer count them as pension, but everything you had on the books was frozen in time. So if I had 100 hours on the books, but when I retire, I have 200, I get paid that 100 hours and it's pensionable. Okay. When we do buyouts, so when we're trying to get people to sell their vacation time, that's not pensionable. It doesn't count.
Do you have it budgeted in this number?
It's budgeted in that number, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so we just looked at the revenue slide and the breakdown of the revenue slide. This is the breakdown of the cost of government. So this is a breakdown of the $111 million that the city manager is proposing. This particular slide deals with our expense categories The next slide will deal with the department budgets. So as you see, again, this starts out at the top. There's the highest salaries and benefits are our two most expensive items. And then again, you move highest to lowest. So IT, insurance, fleet services, those are our most expensive items that you will see in everyone's line item. Then when we have contracted services, so again, that's going to be your security, your janitorial services, and the like. And again, it moves down the line. If you start from the bottom of that middle section where it says subscriptions and memberships, and maybe go 8 lines, the next 8 lines above that, those are really your discretionary funds. Now you can probably go to each one of these line items and you'd be able to pull something out of each one of them and call it, really a discretionary item. But our discretionary spending is really 6 to 7%, $7 million a year. There really isn't a lot of discretion. Now, I'm not saying positions could be called discretionary, depending, vacancies and the like, but really what's built into the department's operating budgets, there's very little discretionary item. If you're going to have a car, you got to maintain it, you got to put fuel in it, and all of those items. You have parks, you got to do water. So, you can't cut those items out of the budget, obviously, without having an impact on the operations. Below that section, we're carrying $700,000 in our contingency account. Operating capital, some departments do have, some small operating capital items within their budgets. We try to give, police and fire at least, $100,000 or so a year so they can kind of, maintain some of the items that they're running on. And then the bottom section are all of our transfers. So again, you see the TIF transfer to the CRA, transfer into debt service, transfer into our capital account, so pay-as-you-go capital, and then the transfer that's required to the major disaster fund. When you take these same numbers, and lay it out, you see here public safety is spending 46% of our budget. General government, which is admin, legal, HR, city clerk, finance, the departments that again kind of serve internal customers. That's 29% of the budget. The support, which is IT, fleet, and insurance, is 11% of the budget. And then public works has 7%. And then parks and the library are that green area, and they're another 7%. Looking at the budgets again, top to bottom, you can see the police department is at the top of the list at 29.9, almost $30 million. The second most expensive item is our general admin. That is where we budget all of those transfers. We budget items such as our rent in there. We budget the contingency in there. So I don't want you to think that that's the city manager's budget. That's the fund that kind of, again, is more of a general operating area. Fire comes in at $21.6 million, and then followed down is Public Works at 7.5, Parks and Rec at 6.4, Development Services at 5.3, and then City Admin, which again is the manager's budget. Keep in mind that includes youth rec, it includes civil drug, it includes economic development, includes the auditor's office. Those are all included in that $5.2 million number. Finances at 3.6, which again does include the meter crew. Human resource at 1.9, legals at 1.2, libraries at 1.2, procurement is at 1 million, and then the legislative is your individual district budgets at just over $1 million, and then city clerk just shy of 800 million. Sorry, Ms. Hall, 800,000. The section off to the right what do we do there is we take the prior year budget, which is the 99.6 million, and we show you all of the changes in the individual department budgets. So again, I don't think it's anybody's surprise that public safety is at the top. Fire's budget is at $3.4 million increase. Police is at a $3 million increase. And then Public Works is at a $1.4 million increase. Parks is up 900,000. General admin is up 8, and then the city admin is 8. Development service up $500,000. Procurement, the big push when we get to personnel and positions, see a whole reorganization of procurement. They were up $300,000. Finance is 120, city clerk 106. Your own budgets are up 78,000, and then legal and library are the only two that are a little bit lower. And again, so it's $11.774 million increase in the budget. Jumping over to, again, if you're not familiar with it, we do provide Riviera Beach open
Mr. Sherman, one
fine.
moment, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Councilwoman McCoy, go ahead.
Sure.
So what was the reduction in legal?
I want to know.
You got that number? I'll have Ms. Reynolds pull that up real quick.
I mean, but a roundabout, you don't know,
No, I'm going to say it's due
surely
to-
there hasn't been a
it's due
reduction
to-
in
No, I think it's,
claims.
I believe it's due to a vacancy and, you know, of course, your salaries go down, but
Yeah, but so that begs the question, if there's a reduction in vacancy, which would now require her, and I know I've seen this, to now be able to shift whatever that vacancy in the dollars that was associated with that position to professional services. Isn't that practical? And does the department heads not have the discretion to move monies within the budget, to reallocate them within their own budget?
they have the discretion to do budget transfers during the year once the budget's approved, but right now, that's not where we are. So we've run the actual salaries and benefits for all the positions and, you know, and posted those within the operating budget. If we had looked at the contracted services, the professional service line, and saw that in 2023, the budget was stressed, then you're right, we would have gone in and we would have, you know, made the adjustments to increase that. But that wasn't warranted as part of the budget at this time.
Okay.
Again, Open Finance is available on the city's website. It's right on the homepage. I believe we hold the bottom right-hand corner on the homepage for the city. This does allow anyone to go in and click through the city's budgets. You can look at the revenues, you can drill down in the revenues, you can drill down in the expenses, all the way down to, you know, the individual vendors and their individual payments. You can look at just the utility district if that's what you want to look at. You can look at multiple years. We've had this for, I believe, 5 years now. So it does allow you to go in, do comparisons, run graphs, and drill back in. So if you wanted to see what a particular department was paying, you know, in their professional services, you could click through this system and you'd see a list of all the payments that were made in a particular account. So again, this is available to you, but it's available, you know, to the public as well. And it's out there 24/7. It's really been a nice tool because we do have some customers who, or, you know, residents that do go out and drill this down and, you know, and sometimes ask some really good questions. This is a listing of our top vendors. This is the top 40 vendors that we had in fiscal 2023. I don't think anybody's surprised again that Kaufman is at the top of the list with the construction of the 2 fire stations at 10.9, almost $11 million. But you'll see real quickly, just in 40 vendors, you go from $11 million down to the bottom right at $421,000.
Chair.
Councilman, go ahead.
So why would we be having Aetna as a vendor if we are not using them, since September 30th of last year.
We were still making, some payments to them.
That's my question. Why?
Mr. Chair, if you may,
Yeah.
if I may,
Go
you
ahead.
may still have some open claims, and you can back bill the claim years. Is that HR? Yeah, and that's fiscal year 23.
2023, not 2024. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nate.
Wait, wait a minute. So the only thing we should be paying them is premiums, not claims. I don't understand what that means.
Right, but I think what Mr. Evans said, there's always a tail out there on these items that needs to be clear. But you're right. What we're paying them, most of this money that you're paying them, that 6%, it's the premiums. So it's what we're withholding, from the employees plus what the city is paying. But again, as Ms. Reynolds pointed out, this is 2023, not 2024.
And that's your health insurance is that the largest single line item in the budget? The health insurance line?
Yes.
What is the city of West Palm for?
That's the ECR payments.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go down the internal revenues, that's obviously the tax payments that we make. U.S. Bank as some of the leases that we've had outstanding. Then you see the city of Airbridge, the CRA, that's the 7.197. That, and then we talked about West Palm, and then you get to the Good Company. And then number 8 is Department of Revenue. That's our retirement payments for FRS. Gallagher is insurance payments for CGL insurance, workers' comp, the like. Haskell is the water plant, and and it goes down, from there. But again, real quickly, you're down to small dollar amounts for our vendors. It doesn't take very long to make. We make a ton of small payments. All right, Mr. Evans, do you want to deal with the dates?
Small payments?
Yeah.
Small payments.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, we wanted to provide the board with a general overview of some of the larger components of the budget. We're going to get really granular in the next budget sessions, where you're going to get presentations on the completed goals and objectives for last fiscal year. Additionally, the goals and objectives for fiscal year 2025. You're going to get a presentation from the departments based on their operational requests and the items that are contained in their operational budgets, as well as the capital budgets. One of the things that I communicated to the departments is we want high visibility, high impact, high value when it comes to projects. We want to make sure that the community and the neighborhoods see the infrastructure investments. And I know for a long time we've been making investments and pushing forward as it relates to facilities, but we want to make sure that this next iteration of our budget really goes into each of the neighborhoods throughout our community. You're also going to see some reorganizations and restructuring of some of the departments. Specifically, most notably, you'll see a transformation that we're proposing in the Public Works Department, where you will see a situation where we will become more of a full-fledged Public Works Department, where we'll be transitioning our employees to more of the skilled trades and disciplines. And so they'll be doing pothole repairs, signage, facilities maintenance, and the like. And we will be contracting out the elements associated with grounds maintenance. So you'll hear from staff with respect to that. Also, on our workshop on the 22nd, you'll hear from the the JV team concerning the water treatment plant, but also you'll hear from myself and other staff concerning some of the changes that are happening right now at the utility district, but also getting a little bit more specificity on what we can anticipate concerning the new water treatment plant, the projected costs, where that project is, and bringing things up to speed. We are going to be moving very aggressively on that. I have 2 of our in-house engineers that are moving to run a point on the new water treatment plant, as well as contractual support that's coming in. So that's an item that we will discuss at the 22nd. If the board would also indulge us, we would like the opportunity to maybe have at the end of that meeting a utility district meeting where we can get the board to approve the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, for the wells. We know that our wells need some substantial investment, and the price is held until the 1st of September. And so if the board would be willing to oblige staff's request, it will be significant in us moving forward to get some of these wells up and operational. The reason that we need to have this discussion sooner rather than later is, as you can see in an article that was also published, these well drillers, there's only a certain number of them throughout the state. And if we don't solidify them and their work, they will move on, and there will be further delays and compromising our ability to be able to get our wells up to speed. So that's one thing that I would like support from the board, that at the end of that meeting, that we can consider having, and maybe it's a start at 9 o'clock or what have you, a utility district meeting just solely for the purposes of hopefully approving the GMP concerning the wells. Also on the 29th, and I'll jump back to the 22nd, on the 29th, we're going to get into some of the capital items associated with the budget, but also some items that the board may want to see included in the budget. One of the things that you'll see is the way in which we did the budget this year. You had there's a list of positions that I put in as it relates to the request and some of the comments that I've heard from board members and some of the things that we need operationally, but I did provide you with a supplemental list that staff is going to be advocating for. These are the items that I did not put into the budget, but I wanted you to hear from the staff to be able to hear some of the operational needs that they have, because there may be positions that are provided for in the proposed budget that you can say, at this time, we want to remove these positions and we want to substitute the positions that the department directors may be asking for. And so there's going to be some discussion amongst you with the department heads when it comes to the reorganization, restructuring, and some of the positions. And then we're going to get into the specificities concerning our capital program. And then we have our first reading of the budget, which is Thursday, September 5th. The reason that it's on a Thursday is it cannot conflict with the school board or the county as it relates to their budget. And so we had to have that meeting on that particular day, and then hopefully second and final reading of the budget on September 18th. And so I want to go back to the meeting on the 22nd. Is the board inclined to have a discussion concerning the utility district, but also a special meeting at the conclusion of that presentation where we're going to bring you up to speed, but ultimately ask you for consideration concerning the GMP on the wells. And I will be providing you with a memorandum concerning specifically what we're asking for, so you have that well in advance of that meeting, so you can have some time, so that discussion in the meeting is quite brief.
I'm okay with that. I believe Dr. Spears, okay.
Chair?
Dr. Spears, go ahead.
Can I just ask a technical question? I went through the budget, the line items. When we get to the utility district and I see the revenues, how do we figure out the difference in the water fee and the sewer fee? Is there a percentage?
No. The rate consultant actually goes through every line item, every charge, every employee, and actually allocates, what's going to sewer, what's going to water. And they actually come out at the end of the day and they go, and as you notice, that's why we have two separate rates, is, they come out and say, this is how much you need to operate the wastewater side of your operations, and this is how much you need to operate the west side. But they, when you get the final report from them, you'll see all the tables, all the calculations. It's a very complex exercise that they go through.
Sure.
Good.
So when you send the fee to the user, is it based on that schedule, or do we do a percentage?
Now, when we send, so they'll come up and they will come up with a rate per 1,000 gallons for both. So the rate is broken up. Here's your base fee, and then for water you pay this, for sewer you pay this, for irrigation you pay yet a third rate. what we do for sewer is it's based off your water meter. So it's 1,000 gallons in, you pay for 1,000 gallons going out. And they understand that what's getting to the ECR is not 100% of what went in, to the house, but that's adjusted in the rates. And then what we do for residents is we cap it at 10,000 gallons. So again, you may use 12,000 gallons, you don't have an irrigation meter, it's capped, the wastewater side is capped at 10,000 gallons.
Do we have a minimum usage on the water, on the domestic water?
We have a,
Minimum usage for the customer?
no, then if there's zero, there's zero, but there's a base fee that they pay.
And how's the base fee work?
So again, when they go through the budget, they actually, break that budget out and they say, okay, here's your fixed capital costs. This is what it costs us to serve you, whether you're using water or not. It's really, we call it a readiness charge. So you could be, have an apartment that's empty for 6 months, but the day you go in there, you want water. That's that's why you pay the readiness charge. Turn it on, your water's there. But they go through again the budget and they're putting it in, in the buckets and coming up with the separate numbers.
Can I get a copy of the formula you use, what your rate person, I guess you bring in a consultant for that?
So we're required to have a rate consultant under our bond documents. I could get you an older copy, because we don't have the current one yet. But if you'd like to see an older versions, you could, look at all the work that goes behind it.
I'd like to see that because
Sure.
especially since we have a transient community, we should really take a good look at those red, what do you call them, a red fee? What?
Readiness?
Readiness fee. We should take a look at that, and we call minimum fees in,
Yeah, okay.
New York. So
Yeah.
we should take a good look at that because we might be losing out on a lot of money.
Mr.
Thank
Chair, Mr. Chair, if I may, and
Good.
and a couple of quick things. One of the things that I will also be asking for at the utility district meeting is authorization for us to proceed with legal action against the town of Mangonia Park. Currently, they owe the city of Riviera Beach $428,000. We have attempted to try to resolve this particular issue, but they are still maintaining their same position. And so I have asked for the city attorney to assist in helping move this item to the subsequent steps. So I just wanted you to know where we stand with that. One of the other items associated with the budget that we've had conversations about is one of the things that we hear from our residents consistently is the monies on the utility bill, what's charged on the utility bill. And on your utility bill, you have solid waste services as well as your stormwater assessment. And so one of the conversations and questions that we wanted to have with the board, and there's some notice requirements that are required to facilitate, but invariably looking to remove those items off the your utility bill. So invariably having the utility bill serve as just specifically associated with the utility, so you wouldn't have your stormwater assessments and solid waste services on the utility bill. You can place those items on the tax bill. And so before we went into moving in that direction, we wanted to see if there was an appetite from the board to effectively consider that. And now, Mr. Sherman, you've done some research with regards to that, and if you wanted to provide any more clarity with respect to our desire, because one of the things we believe is if we're effectively able to do that, we project that it will roughly be about $35 to $40 that would be removed off of that bill, and so you would, have a situation where, they get the statutory discount if they do in fact pay it on their taxes, but also a situation where you will in fact reduce that bill. But we know that invariably when we look to come forward with a rate increase associated with the new water treatment plant, you do have a situation where there is some additional capacity, for lack of better terms, that you would create on the bill, Mr. Sherman.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is we typically carry 6, 7, 8% uncollectibles by putting it on the utility bill. It again, comment about, the transient community. If you put it in on the property tax bill, you're going to get 100% collection. Now, again, you do get the statutory, discount by paying your bill on time. But it's a more solid number. Again, we get, all that money up front, and we actually would be able to, again, share that back with the ratepayers. The other big hurdle, and I'll see if I can explain this right. When you're coming in and you're opening an account, okay, your deposit requirement is 3 months of an average bill. So we take an average bill of 5,000 gallons. You have to make a deposit of 3 times what that monthly bill would be. So that includes the water, the sewer, the trash, the stormwater. So by taking this $35 off of that bill, it actually assists with people being able to get into the property because now their deposit is less. They're not making a, deposit to us of 3 times the trash rate and 3 times the stormwater rate. And I know that may, sound like that's not a big thing, but, we watch a lot of people, renters, they're coming in, they're bringing us their lease, and we tell them what that deposit's going to be. And, a lot of them, struggle with that. So again, that would allow, a little bit of assistance that we could, to maybe ease that a little bit.
Mr. Chair.
But
Okay, so now on your rates for water, what do you do? I assume you have a different rate for commercial and residential,
Correct.
correct? Do you charge commercial based on usage?
We
The
charge,
larger users pay more money per gallon?
they pay more money per gallon and they pay a higher meter rate. So their readiness charge is far more than.
Mr. Chair,
But
also one of the things that we're having our rate consultant do is look at a dynamic rate structure to look to establish if the baseline for your normal consumption of water in our community is 5,000 gallons, that you can offer a reduced rate for our residents, and those that are higher or peak users can pay a premium rate. So that is something that the board can consider to create some rate control when you do look to come forward with a new water treatment plant and the like. And so that's something from a policy-making perspective that the board needs to be prepared for that discussion with staff. The other side of it is, and provided for in our code, and we've never, in essence, flexed those muscles, is to facilitate the developers helping share in the cost associated with the infrastructure in our community. We have the provisions that are provided for in the code. We can allow for that to be part of the development agreement. But one of the things we need to move away from is a situation where by the residents or the ratepayers assume a lot of the costs associated with the infrastructure investments in our community. So as projects come on the horizon, you can anticipate us looking to invoke that, and we'll have more greater detail with the board and discussions with the board when we look to bring that forward. But we do want to really be aggressive in going after those opportunities for the developers to defray some of the costs for the infrastructure. And lastly, just for the board, and just if I can receive direction from the board, is the board willing to consider staff putting forward the appropriate notifications that are required to effectively look to move the items that we talked about, stormwater, solid waste fees, onto the tax bill and remove it off the utility bill? Because it's required for us to provide notice, and I think it's 4 weeks consecutively before you all have that opportunity for a public hearing process.
Mr. Chair?
but
So, Mr. Evans, so then what happens to a condominium, for example, that isn't paying taxes? The unit owners pay the taxes. So does the utility bill go on to each individual unit owner's tax bill?
Mr. Chair, that is my understanding, yes. And Mr. Chair, if it's the board's pleasure for me to draft an agenda item and just ask for confirmation of direction at another meeting, that we can have a document that you can see how it affects condo owners, single-family home, what the statute calls for, and then you can give me direction in a formal public setting, and then we can facilitate that. Staff is comfortable in moving in that direction as well.
Mr. Chair?
But
So, but the problem is that when the condominiums pay their bill, they pay it for, let's say, an entire building. Let's say there's 3 buildings on the property, but now each unit is using a different amount of water and it's not metered. So would each building then have to put in a meter in order to determine how much water each unit, or are you going to just make it based on the number of units?
Mr. Chair, if I may, it would be for the provision of solid waste services. So each individual condo association has different agreements that they may have with the solid waste provider, and so that may be handled different. The stormwater, it's based on the impervious surface, and so it's the calculation. So I think it would just be probably a flat rate, and I'd have to. Okay, so yeah, it would be a flat rate that would be provided in there. And we'll get some specificities when we do bring that agenda item for your consideration, and I'll have it as a discussion and deliberation item.
Great, thank you.
Chair, that's concludes our presentation from staff.
comments from the board? Councilwoman Lanier, any comments tonight? Councilman Spiritus? Councilman Miller Anderson? No? Okay. Mr. Evans, few items that I just had going in for some of the direction that I would like us to see and visit. I know we mentioned in the position changes where we talked about the marketing manager position. I think we need to kind of look at the marketing and communications, a possible department and a director versus a marketing manager. So see if the board would be interested in looking at that as an overall budget. I want somebody that can be in charge of kind of communications, marketing, and media, and just have an entire department as opposed to somebody just inside your city manager's office. Reason being is there's a few things that kind of fall by the wayside when it comes to communications. And then also we have a $111 million budget. Like, I haven't been with any organization that doesn't put any dollars into communications and marketing and media. So I really think we need to make a focus on that. Second priority I'm looking for is the disparity study, MBE, SPE, local minority businesses. I want to make sure that we're focused on that when we actually address this budget. We've had concerns that you're going to be addressing in a memo about the SPE businesses and small businesses. And last but not least, the social services and nonprofits. When we first got elected and up until Good Company came in, I think that this board was allocating about $100,000 annually through community benefits. And a lot of the nonprofits organizations are suffering to provide support. So I wanted to take a look and visit that and see how that can be budgeted in. I know we had some dollars coming in from Kaufman Lynn, and that's coming directly to the city. So if we can possibly have that budgeted, or if we can have that allocated so we can assist some of the nonprofits.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Yes, those are all items that will be part of the budget discussions in the next couple of iterations that we have.
Perfect. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we got that on the record so that when it comes around, we can be prepared for it. Thank you. Additional comments? No further business. Meeting's adjourned.